Right, welcome back to Daybreak News Review with the Honorable Gladys Wanga, Jacqueline Mugo and Rose Omamo. And let's now focus on what has been concerning the worker over the past 1 year. And we have had some disputes, and I'll just highlight some of them. The latest one is the Kenya Airports Workers Union that we saw affecting the operations at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. It ended up in court. There were arrests made. There's a conciliatory team that had been constituted. We didn't see tangible results, and that is why it ended up with that downing of tools. We had the nurses union earlier on in the year. They downed their tools, of course, complaining about the collective bargaining agreement of 2017 November, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. But they went back to work without a tangible solution. They were told the Council of Governors was going to look into it and see the solution out of it. The teachers, we began the year with worry whether schools were going to open. The teachers union, especially NAT, had said that there were issues that needed to be resolved. Still went to a conciliatory team, then to court. Why is it becoming so difficult to resolve issues amicably before they erupt into chaos?
It's difficult to resolve issues amicably because of hard lines. I would say it's because of hard lines, because you find that the employer is not ready to negotiate with the unions. And sometimes they are ready to negotiate. They negotiate, but at some point, they disagree. So when this disagreement comes up, it escalates into a dispute. And if parties are not in agreement, then they feel, let us look for a third-party opinion. Why? Because the two of us are not agreeing. And if you look at all these unrests that you have mentioned, you find that for some, there is lack of implementation of the agreed clauses. And some, it is completely disagreement of negotiating committee. But I want to say that for negotiations, parties must be flexible and have the willingness to negotiate. It is a matter of give and take. But if you want to take everything for yourself, then it becomes difficult also for the unions, because they represent their members.
Right.
And they also want to represent the interest of their members. And if the interest of their members is not taken into account, then the only tool that they will have is to cause a national unrest, which is a strike, for example. And
but have union leaders become so hostile to even allow space for amicable solution and even allow time to go through mediation?
Not at all. Union leaders are very flexible. They are very flexible because they believe in the spirit of giving and taking. They don't want to take everything for themselves, because it is collective bargaining. It is negotiations. And in a negotiation table, you don't expect to carry everything with you and go away with it. You also expect to give your partner, who is your employer, for example. And so I believe that the leaders or the representatives are always very flexible, ready to negotiate, ready to give and ready to take. That is the spirit of negotiation. But when parties cannot agree, then you have no option but to raise a trade dispute.
So, Honorable Gladys Wanga, let's look at the example of the nurses. The CBA was signed in 2017. Last year, we saw some counties that actually actualized it, others were still falling asleep on that same issue. Why is it so difficult for the government to then actualize a CBA that they signed on when it comes to actualizing it?
Well, I think let me just say broadly, I think the whole management of health workers, the health workforce in this country needs to be reviewed. The way we have done it so that every county negotiates with its own workers, it doesn't work. There has to be a way, like the teachers, where there is a National Health Services Commission, so that the welfare of all the workers can be negotiated at that national scale. You know, because if you leave it to every county, then we saw this county, you know, the workers are back, this one, the workers are not, and so on. You leave it too much dependent on, this is one of the services that is so critical that has to be negotiated at the national level. I think I wanted to say that, so that as we move forward, one of the proposals that we are making, for example, if we have a referendum or change of the constitution, is to set up a health services commission that manages the health workforce broadly. But I think the other thing is corruption has really taken a lot of our money. Even in your own house, there's a lot of conflict. If you don't have money and if you're broke, and then somebody comes and says, even if it's your wife or your brother or your, say, whoever it is, or your husband, they say, oh, can you give me some money? Because, last week the food money was not enough. Can you add it? What will be your reaction if you are totally broke? It can even cause a third world war in that house. That is the situation with the Kenyan, government. If a lot of our money has been taken away by corruption. Right. So we are in a place where we are kind of broke even, the government is struggling. Somebody said the government was surviving. In many ways, we are currently just, finding ways of survival. So when government hears that somebody wants an increase, even if it is deserved, their immediate reaction will be, even if they signed it, even if they were supposed to give it, if employers here, we want you to add us money, they start bringing the productivity. Where is the productivity? Yet, one of the debates we've been having in the Labour Committee is how do we measure? Do we have capacity in our country to measure productivity properly so that we're able to reward people based on that so-called, So when people are broke generally, I think it's more difficult to negotiate, and that's why we are seeing people are angrier, people are hungry, people are angry, people, people don't know how to survive, because even government, I think, sometimes is sympathetic to the workers. Even employers sometimes are sympathetic. They say, surely these people are working under very difficult conditions. But then the economy is just not performing sufficiently sometimes.
Okay, and from the employer's perspective, when you see every other year there is a labor dispute from one of the sectors, like almost certain, like even next year we can predict that a certain labor sector will have issues. So how does this affect the morale of the workers first and the productivity? Because when you lose like a month, how much do you lose economically, and more importantly, the morale even for the rest of the year?
I think one thing we need to realize and accept as labor sector leaders is that strikes don't work. A strike is not the answer to a problem in the labor sector. And if you see all the strikes we've had in the last 1 year, they've been largely, almost exclusively, in the public service. So there's a problem about social dialogue in the public service. The nurses strike, the doctors strike, the Kenya Airports Authority, NAT, all these are public service entities. So we need to strengthen dialogue in those sectors. Two is the fact that we have allowed strikes in essential services, which does not happen in any part of the world. I serve on the committee at the ILO on freedom of association. It recognizes that there are services that are classified as essential, that is health, water provision, airports, which are protected from strikes, and it means you have to heighten the dialogue. So if you go on strike for a month, 2 months, and at the end of the day, as you said, you have to go back to work and you really didn't get anything, then what was that strike about? What it has done is hurt that sector, reduce the productivity because it's not been performing. So there's therefore no money to give to the workers, which is what they were demanding in the first place. So the situation is even worse. Let me talk about health. I agree with Mheshimiwa about the National Health Commission, but we are the same country that devolved health. We were not supposed to devolve health. Certainly not in the first year of devolution, because we were not ready. Now you have the health service workers and many other workers working for different counties. It's very difficult to speak to them as one. So you have county A that can afford, another county cannot afford. We needed to have managed devolution better so as to protect particularly the essential service sector. Productivity is very easy to measure. You look at the inputs. What does it cost you to run your manufacturing enterprise in the last 1 year? Having spent on labor, on other costs, what at the end of the day are your returns? So inputs and outputs, so that you can then determine that actually we have realized gains of this amount. And when you're then negotiating with the unions, that information is known. You can agree what can go into salary increases, what needs to be reinvested in new technology, what needs to go into creating employment for other Kenyans.
So how are you dealing with calls for better pay, better working conditions at the private sector? Because rarely will you hear that workers, for instance, at Trump Media Services have gone on strike. So from the perspective of private employers, how are you handling disputes? Is it that it's all peace?
It's unfortunate Rose says that employers are not ready to negotiate, because every single day the Federation is chairing 3 or 4 collective bargaining agreement negotiations between unions and various companies, and we are reaching agreement. We look at the parameters of wage increments, we look at the performance of that enterprise, the cost of living, the ability of the employer to pay, and the need for investment, and we agree. And most of the CBAs being negotiated in the last 1 year, 5 to 8%. At least those parties take into account the cost of living, the factors of wage determination as we know it. But if you demand 20, 30%, 50% increase in an economy that's growing by 5%, 5.7%, where is that money going to come from? So I think the demands need to be realistic.
Right. I think I also want to say that Jacqueline said, I say the employers are not ready to negotiate. But I said there are employers who are hardliners, who take hardline during the process of negotiation. Because I personally do negotiations at Federation of Kenya Employers, and I've signed several CBAs with the employers.
Are they honored?
Yes, they are honored, they are registered, and they are implemented. And even during the time of registration, we, the union and the Federation of Kenya Employers, appear before the court to register these CBAs, which have done very well in the private sector. But I'm saying that there are those employers who are hardliners, who even when we are negotiating at the Federation of Kenya Employers, they will not accept to give. They will want to take everything. And when that happens, then we have to raise a trade dispute, which also the Federation of Kenya Employers agree to, and say that at this point you need to go to the next arbitration or to the next...
right.
But I wanted to come in on the issue of essential services. And I know that we have had a bill, an amendment bill in Parliament on banning strikes for essential services, but we rejected it, and the reason is because our workers in these essential, so-called essential services cushioned enough? Because and Jackie says she sits in the ILO, and I think countries that protect essential services from strikes and so on, I'm sure have dealt with the issues of how do they treat workers in those sectors so that they are not exposed to the same challenges that all the other workers in other services that can actually come out and express their concerns, are exposed to. So before we go that direction, I think we must know how we must, be convinced that our workers, whether they're health workers or workers in the water sector or, whatever services we will classify as essential, how are they treated so that they are not, we are not suppressing or depressing them, and while we tell them they cannot actually strike.
Okay, Paul Chemjoro on Twitter says that a salary review should be done. Some public servants are still paid very low at this time of the year when the economic conditions has really changed. So tomorrow is Labor Day, and there has been several concerns, especially from the different sectors. The government comes with programs, it needs to raise some money, implements the VAT taxation. I remember your voice before Parliament. So there's more money being taken away from the pay slip of the worker. Now we hear of a housing levy, which is a matter in court. We may not delve into the details. But how is this affecting the worker? Every other year, how do you feel as a worker?
As workers, we feel frustrated when our monies are deducted, and indeed it is very frustrating. And I want to say that in this country we can say that the economy is not good in the country at the moment. And the workers are suffering because you look at the salary which you are given, like, for example, 2 years ago. Coming to 2 years later, the basket that you used to do shopping with cannot even be quarter. If it used to be full, at that particular time, it cannot be quarter. And that is why we normally believe in trying to see how can we caution what we have.
And speaking of caution, there's one specific issue that has really come out in the past few weeks that perhaps even as we are about to mark Labor Day tomorrow, we cannot fail to talk about it right here. As KOTU, the umbrella body for the trade unions here in Kenya, what are you doing, or what are you pushing for to make sure that you are indeed protecting, and I also love to hear from Jacqueline on this specific issue, how it is that you're protecting Kenyans, especially in the informal sector, the small traders, from outside influence, e.g. the Asian giant China. We've seen a lot of them come here in Kenya, where it's, some say it's a bitter and sweet relationship, but as KOTU, as the Federation of Kenya, what have you done? How are you voicing, how are you pushing to make sure that Kenyans are being protected in terms when it comes to work?
We have always given our voices when it comes to protecting these workers, whether informal or informal, because we believe that this is a country that should be independent in terms of its membership. But when we see like Chinese coming in, now you get them in our markets.
Yes.
They have become hawkers. And yet we have our fellow Kenyans who can be hawking and getting something for their food. We have always said that this is killing our industry, which is the informal industry, because we also speak for them. And look at right now, even when you look at the China roads, the roads that they are doing, you find that when they go away without leaving any expertise behind. They go away with everything that they came with.
Right.
This is killing our industry. We've always said that we need, if people are coming into this country, the kind of work that they should do should be of an expertise that we can also understand. But for those jobs that our own people can do, let it be left to our own people. For example, we don't need to see Chinese hawking while we have Kenyans who can hawk. But now they have come with very many tactics of, you know, getting into this, getting into that.
Is there no chance of controlling that?
Of course there's a chance of controlling that, because the problem is not the Chinese. The problem is Kenya allowing anybody to come into our country to buy land. You can't buy land in Tanzania, you can't buy land in China. But they come here, they buy land anywhere they want, they set up, they have papers, not just work permits, but long-term visas. So we need to rethink this open, welcome everybody. Where do we allow the Chinese? The other day I saw our SMEs saying that there should be a level of investment required of foreigners when they come into Kenya. It should be big investments, not 100,000, 200,000, 250,000, because that's where the ordinary Kenyans are playing. And for us to do that, we need as labor sector leaders, these are the issues we should be discussing. Not strikes, not agreeing to deductions on workers' salaries, which the workers are saying they are frustrated, but they're the same ones saying, yes, come and deduct our money. So that is contradictory to me. The laws that we make in this country must protect the Kenyans first and foremost. There I agree with Rose. So as employers, what are we doing? We actually have a program with the Chinese operating here to tell them, first of all, our culture, because there have been complaints, so that they understand why Kenyans function the way they do, and so that we can also hear their issues. But people coming to work, foreigners coming to work to Kenya, it's a reality. But when Kenyans go out, they don't have the same privileges. That is why even at the lowest level, we have all sorts of foreigners coming from Tanzania, Uganda to work here. Why? Because our minimum wage is the highest in the EAC region. And ahead of Labor Day, I hope there's not going to be a discussion of increasing the minimum wage, because there have been no meetings whatsoever by the ministry to discuss that.
Gladys will have the final word, but before you do, there's something you said interesting there about the workers agreeing to some deductions and you are opposed to. I would just want to understand from the employer's reasoning and thinking, why is it so hard to agree to the housing levy, 1.5%, to be deducted on the employees as well as you making the contribution?
Well, the housing levy matter is in court, so we can't discuss it in detail, but I wanted to go on record that FK is not party to any agreement purportedly signed by government agreeing to that levy. There are a raft of reasons why we are saying no, but the bottom line is that as we sit here today, there are proposals to introduce a housing levy. There are proposals to enhance the National Housing Insurance Fund to make employers match. There are proposals to double the National Industrial Training Levy. And of course, the NSSF, 6% is yet to kick in. When you look at all those deductions, we are telling government, hey, how do you expect enterprises to function? And how do you expect enterprises, formal sector, to create jobs if they're overtaxed? And I think Kenyans are very stressed. The ordinary person actually does not want an increase on deductions on their pay slips, and there Rose is right, because they're already stretched. If you're paying 30–40% tax, what should happen is that all these other services you should be able to get. You should be sure of water, electricity, health, in some education. So you pay a high tax, even as high as 50%, but then everybody is happy that the government is providing all.
But you don't feel that?
It doesn't happen. It's not. It's a reality. It does not happen in Kenya. So what are we paying tax for?
Okay, good point. So Gladys, as we wind up on this, yes, all those concerns, labor sector that has seen all those challenges the past 1 year. Tomorrow is Labor Day. What should we expect to resolve the challenges that the workers and the employers have enumerated?
Yeah, well, I think I feel the employers, and as a worker, I must say that I think it would be nice to have an increase for workers. It would be a good thing, and I think employers, are unhappy to hear that. But
she doesn't agree.
I think the housing levy, I think is the way it has been handled has left a lot to be desired. But it would be nice to see that employers are concerned about how their workers are living and contributing something towards it. That would have been a good thing in my view. But I think the way it's been communicated, the fact that Kenyans are uncertain about how they're going to, after contributing, how you're actually going to get your house, I think is because there are many employers also who declare huge profits, but their workers, when you go to those institutions, their workers are not, not reflecting, the same huge, declarations of profits that we are seeing. So at the end of the day, I think let Labor Day be a happy day for workers. If there was an increase, I would be happy.
I wouldn't.
I would be very, very happy. If there was, in fact, I think if there is an increase for workers, some deductions can actually be made. Especially, the housing agenda. And let me just say something about the housing.
Okay,
the good thing about the housing agenda is the way it was actually finally even going to create employment and work for our people. Right. Because we said when they're building houses, the windows, the doors, the cupboards, the what have you will be done by local young people, and that's attractive. Okay. But I think where it goes a bit wrong is the fact that when you contribute, first of all, you're not sure about accountability for that money that you're contributing, and the fact that it was said here by one of the officials that in fact it's going to be a lottery, for you to get. It's not even first come, first serve. It's not even, the whole mystery in the allocation is where the problem is. But I think Kenyans, living in decent houses would be a good, thing.
Let me tell you that
finally,
we have systems of wage determination in this country, which are supposed to be discussed rationally by the wages councils away from Labor Day. The motive increases, it's Labor Day, let's give an increase. It's not the way to do it. And that's the challenge we have, because last year the minister just woke up, gave 5%, and they took a year to gazette it. It was just gazetted about 2 months ago. So that's the problem we have. It should be discussed. We should look at the factors that will then determine the quantum. On housing, employers are already paying 15% as housing allowance. Employers have mortgage schemes for their workers. The employers with large numbers of residential staff who are housed where they work, big companies that largely in the agricultural sector, the employers who pay consolidated salaries that factors in housing. So what's going to happen to this? And as Mheshimiwa says, the whole structure of the housing levy is an issue, but we can't go into details because it's in court. But I think the key issue here is when we want to effect change as a country, let's discuss the details before implementing it, instead of saying actually the constructions are already going on, people have been contracted. I think the government was here saying that their service providers contracted that as stretching as far as Kenya to Timbuktu, the only issue they need is money to start the project. So we're being asked to pay for something that's already going on.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That brings us to a close of this conversation. Gladys Wanga, Women Rep for Homa Bay, as well as Jacqueline Mugo, the Executive Director for the Federation of Kenya Employers, Rose Omamo, the chair for the Women Committee at Kotu. Ladies, thank you so much for your time today.
She was itching to say something, but let's take a look at a tweet that has come through from a viewer at Citizen TV Kenya. Francis Gigondo. Kenyan workers are underpaid. Our private sector is very exploitative. Best example is teachers in private schools who are paid peanuts in some schools, which charge very high fees and breaking millions in profits. Of course, the rich would like to keep the profits.
That's public sector.
10 seconds.
Yes, I want to say that I would be very happy to see Kenyans given salaries during this Labor Day because the salaries that the workers are getting is meager, and right now they are all looking towards getting the salary. And in regards to the housing levy, I want to say that we as Central Organization of Trade Unions, if the salaries will be increased, then we will support the housing levy, because then we know that there is something that will cushion what will be deducted from our salaries. Yes.
Okay. So the employer pays twice.
Of course, the employer here is not very happy about that, but of course we've come to the end of that discussion. Thank you so much for your time and for taking part in the conversation from wherever you're watching us from, on Citizen TV Kenya on Twitter, as well as on 2242. Be sure to sample some of the views later on as we progress.